Igor Girkin's activities, first in Crimea and later in Donbass, really started the conflict in 2014. And now this entire region, from Crimea to the Kherson area to Zaporizhia, are again under threat, not just from the Russian army itself, but also from the repercussions of this enormous natural disaster that has been caused by the Russians. We should remember that according to calculations, around 80 small towns are expected to suffer severe damages due to the flooding. Maybe 1,000 small villages or so. Around 500,000 farmers will lose their land due to this flooding. So it is an ecological disaster on enormous scale. And if we look at historical parallels, it also shows a lot about the continuity in Russian thinking. We remember that they used to interfere with rivers during the Soviet days as well.
Yes, creating massive environmental damage.
Yes, they were in Siberia. They were trying to shift the flow of the rivers to go in the opposite direction compared to where they used to go. Also, there is the case of the Aral Sea, for example, which used to be an enormous sea, or rather lake, but big enough to be called a sea. And since due to Soviet plans on using the water reaching the lake from the rivers for watering cotton fields in the area, they diverted so much water that they caused an ecological disaster with the Aral Sea just decreasing in size from year to year, and it has proved to be a practically irreversible course of events. So now today, what you have off that area that used to be the Aral Sea is basically these dried up terrains that are just full of salt, and then you have these dust bowls that come and pick up the salt and move the salt to other nearby lying areas, and making that land completely impossible for agriculture. So unfortunately, we can see that in Russian thinking, just as in 1941 when they blew up the Zaporizhia Dam to stop the Wehrmacht, today as well, they make short-sighted.
Their thinking is very destructive. But it seems that militarily they have no clue. I mean, their soldiers seem to behave in their tactics the same as the Second World War, just sort of destroy things, rape women, generally visit terror onto the population. There's no sort of advance in their strategic military thinking of the sort which seems to have taken place in other armies. It's very strange to see it. It is almost like a reenactment of the worst aspects of the Second World War.
There are those who stress that a lot of Russian political culture, but also military culture, stems back to those centuries that they were either under full direct control or as vassals of, well, initially the Mongols, later on by the Golden Horde and the Tatars. And we all know the stories of the Mongol army that used fear and directly terror. It was early methods of terror to strike fear into the populations that they were either conquering or just about to conquer. They would capture entire cities and slaughter all the residents, just as a warning to the next city that if you don't open the gates for us, then the exact same fate will await you. So there are those that say that this brutality that we have seen with the Okhrana...
This is not so much historical. You may have, and it is slightly illustrates a point, I think. In the film of Dr. Zhivago, there's a bit where the hero, of course, is on the train and meets a character who's obviously based on Trotsky. And they've just, their train, they come across Trotsky's train, but the train they've been travelling to exile in has stopped. And he wanders off into the forest and comes across this train and meets this character who's supposed to represent Trotsky. And he said, we've just passed through a burning village. You've burnt the wrong village. And the Trotsky character says, a village rebelled, a village was burnt, the point was made. And the point was it didn't matter in those eyes that it was the wrong village. The Germans did something in the Second World War, Oradour-sur-Glane, which you can visit, and it's still left as it was. They got the wrong Oradour, in fact.
Yes.
There were 2 Oradours. But this cruelty where it doesn't matter, you've made the point, which is the true terrorist mentality.
Absolutely.
That you do things which the other side is sort of rendered helpless because nobody can imagine that anybody else would stoop to those depths. Extraordinary. And this seems to be still the main approach of the Russians.
And as we see in this case, it has led to the death of who knows how many, but certainly it will be counted in the hundreds. This flooding of the Kherson region. What is a little bit fortunate is that the city of Kherson itself, it is located on quite high terrain. It quickly rises by a good 40-50 meters on the right bank of the Dnipro River, meaning that the city of Kherson itself, there is a river though that you could say is an offshoot from the Dnipro River, which goes into the city itself. That river will naturally flood significantly, but it's not that the entire city of Kherson itself will be flooded. If that would have been the case, then naturally we would be counting the deaths in the thousands. What is striking though is that if that city of Kherson would have been low-lying, but simply been downstreams from the Novakakhovka Dam, I have no doubt in my mind that the Russians would still make exactly same
it would have
decision.
made no difference. And on that rather horrific point, I fear we must finish this session. But thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
There we are, yet again defeated by the clock. But I hope you've enjoyed as much as we have, and we'll see you again, I hope, next time on Poland Daily History. Thank you for watching.